This is Bando, a total wreck of a guy whose life had completely fallen apart. All he had left was a mountain of debt and a flood of texts from loan sharks blowing up his phone. His investment portfolio had a return of 99%. Just like mine, honestly. Seriously guys, subscribe, I'm begging you here. As far as he was concerned, it was all over. So he was about to put an end to all that misery, once and for all. But first, naturally, he needed a moment to think things through. Bando didn't believe in God one bit. His only hope was to somehow be reborn so he could, I don't know, maybe buy Bitcoin back when it was worth $1. That's when he climbed up to the edge of the bridge. He closed his eyes. But like the legendary coward he was, he immediately chickened out the second he looked down. Then, out of nowhere, a voice from below eggs him on to just go for it. Startled by the distraction, he starts to fall. In what he thinks are his final moments, he begs to be saved, screaming that he doesn't want to die like this. But a hand grabs his shirt with an iron grip, stopping him mid-fall. The figure tears into him for being such an idiot, and tosses him back onto the bridge, still gasping and shaking. He can barely get out a thank you to the person who just saved his life. And well, the one who gave him a second chance turns out to be this shady old man who obviously must be hiding some seriously weird secret. Oh, almost forgot. I came across this manga this week, thought it was pretty solid. I'd give it a 67 out of 100. Our guy starts wondering if this old man is some kind of crazy cosplayer or a whole new breed of villain. The man fixes his eyes on his tablet and slowly reads his name out loud. Han Bando. Is that really your name? The old man asks. Then, out of nowhere, he gives his own thumb a long, disgusting lick and tries to swipe the screen on his tablet, leaving Han Bando absolutely baffled. A few minutes later, the old man finally gets the thing to work and starts pulling up the guy's info. He reveals that Bando is a 40-year-old unemployed virgin with a never-ending list of debts and overdue taxes. And to top it all off, he says the guy blew every investment he ever touched, and even embezzled money from his own employer. The old man stares him down with pure contempt, asking if he lost all that money in crypto because he's completely out of his mind. Our guy tries to defend himself, swearing up and down that his own boss told him to invest that money. He then starts wondering if it was his loan sharks who turned him in to the cops. But when he takes a good look at the old man, he realizes this weird guy looks absolutely nothing like a cop. Either way, he decides he needs to find a way to ditch this shady old man as fast as possible. Without a second thought, our guy charges at him with everything he's got, but the creature doesn't even flinch. Out of nowhere, a flash cuts through the darkness, and the old man lands a brutal punch right across the guy's face, saying that dying without paying your debts is the ultimate act of cowardice. The man warns him that death wouldn't be the end of his problems. Then, he winks at the poor guy and asks if he'd like to go back to the past and clean up his karma. But Han ignores the offer and takes off running in a panic across the bridge. Given the man's age, Han wonders if this guy is even human. That's when he looks up at the sky and completely loses it when he sees the old man floating high above him. A split second later, the man drops from the sky like a meteor. Pinning the guy down by the throat, the old man tells him to calm down and says he's not done talking. Then, he repeats the question, wanting to know what he would do if he got a second chance. But as an answer, our hero headbutts the old man hard right in the nose. Han backs off and says that whole pitch sounds like a classic scam. But when he turns around, the poor guy comes face to face with the old man's fingers right in front of his eyes, and with a simple snap of his fingers, the being slams him full force into the ground, carving an impressive trail of destruction through the asphalt. The old man takes offense at being called a scammer and walks over to Bando, who's lying on the ground, and tears into him for always blaming others and running from the consequences. The old man calls him the lowest of the low for not caring about the lives he wrecked along the way. With a massive bump on his head, Bando blurts out that he never wanted things to end up like this. Brushing past the drama, the old man says he has an offer that's too good to refuse. And like magic, a book appears out of thin air in his hands. Bando can't stop wondering where the hell this lunatic pulled that from. Then, he explains that so many people are drowning in debt these days that due to a shortage of staff up above, the gods created a new system, a program called the Great Escape Service. He strikes a dramatic pose, saying they give a second chance to those who want to clean up their karma and turn their life around, and says that if humans clean up their own mess, it makes their job a whole lot easier. The old man puts his hand on the guy's shoulder and asks what he thinks of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Well, Bando now finds himself staring down a completely bizarre choice. The old man promises a new life if he pulls it off. That's when he says it's time to work out. The old man starts doing squats with a heavy barbell right there on the bridge. Even though it all sounds insane, Bando stares down at the river and starts thinking about whether any of this could actually be real. After all, if he truly got a second shot at life, his disaster of an existence might actually change. He decides it doesn't matter if it's a scam, because he has absolutely nothing left to lose. Working up his nerve, Bando turns around and agrees to join this so-called Great Escape Service. Well, the old man celebrates with a thumbs up and then makes some strange gestures with his hands. But to the guy's horror, the old man reaches his entire hand deep under his own robe. Bando is absolutely horrified. With a bizarre look on his face, the old man cheers, saying he finally found what he was looking for. He holds up a pack with 3 regression pills, swearing they'll send him back in time. Bando's eyes light up with excitement, but then immediately remembers that those things just came from the old man's private areas. With that, Bando throws a full-force punch right into the gut of that disgusting old man. He says it's just one of those regular hard candies you see at traffic lights. But in that same instant, the old man strikes back by jabbing both fingers directly into the poor guy's eyes. The old man tells him he should at least read the ingredients. Still with his eyes watering, he squints at the label on the pill, which warns about the side effects. He's completely horrified by what he reads, finding the whole situation beyond suspicious. The old man then explains that this is a special service and guarantees 3 chances to start over. However, he warns about one small side effect. The guy won't get to choose where in time he ends up. The time travel will send him straight to the crossroads that had the biggest impact on his miserable life. Without wasting a second, the man shoves the terms in front of him and tells him to sign the contract already. Seeing the young man hesitate, the old man threatens to leave and go find another rock-bottom loser. Bando swallows hard, knowing that with 3 chances, it would be pretty much impossible for him to fail again. He knows this was a golden opportunity. Without reading another word, he grabs the pen and signs the contract. Pill in hand, Bando climbs back up onto the bridge railing and jumps into the void while popping the candy in his mouth. The old man panics, demanding to know how he could just jump without reading the rest of the rules. On the way down, Bando bites into the pill with a wild grin, not caring whether any of this is real or just a dream. He plummets toward the water, flipping his middle finger. The old man screams, warning that abusing that power would finish him off for good. Falling into a massive dark void, the guy feels his consciousness slowly slipping away. In his final moments of clarity, he can only hope that this fresh start will actually work. A moment later, he begins to slowly open his eyes. Looking around, he spots a classroom and wonders where on earth he ended up. But suddenly, a piece of chalk is hurled at full force and nails him right in the head. Irritated, he rubs his forehead and starts cursing out that wretched old man, demanding to know where he was sent. That's when a voice cuts him off. His old teacher was furious that he'd been sleeping in class. Startled, the guy finally remembers that nightmare of a math teacher from his senior year. He looks at the calendar and freezes when he realizes he's been sent back to the year 2000, back to his high school days. As punishment, the teacher starts slapping Bando hard across the face repeatedly, telling him to wake up and get his act together. Even with his cheek burning, he cries tears of joy when he realizes the pain is real and that he actually went back to the past. The teacher kicks him out of class immediately. While trying to get his bearings, our guy is caught off guard by a familiar voice, saying he took forever to show up. When he looks over, he comes face to face with Lee Hyun-seok, his ride or die, asking if he got caught sleeping again. Bando is completely overwhelmed, seeing how young his best friend from back in the day still looks. The same guy who would end up being such a lifeline for him in the future. The friend starts complaining about math class, saying the subject only exists to put students to sleep. In that moment, the divine messenger's words about the great crossroads of his life echo in Bando's mind. He always believed that choosing the humanities track in high school was what ended up tanking his future. But when he realizes he's been sent back to senior year, he starts wondering if there was something even more important than that choice. But the teacher quickly kills the vibe, ordering the two of them to shut up and drop into push-up position. But Bando ignores this and tries to dig through his memory for the big regret he must have made back then. He tries to remember exams, games, or anything trivial. That's when a light bulb goes off and he thinks of the stock market and Bitcoin. But then he quickly realizes crypto is still a solid 10 years away from being a thing. Meanwhile, his friend just won't stop rambling, which makes Bando snap at him and ask what he wants. The kid explains he's talking about the meeting of the group called the Red Warriors happening on Saturday. Hearing that name, Bando completely freezes. He finally gets it. He was sent back to exactly the time when Korea's national soccer team was the center of the universe. He remembers that back in those glory days, his friend was a complete fanatic about the team, something he used to find pathetic and embarrassing. But then the 2002 World Cup became an absolutely massive phenomenon. The sharp-minded Hyun-seok used his connections in the group to build a successful business. Back then, anything with a World Cup logo on it turned into a guaranteed hit, sparking a full-blown economic boom across the entire country. In the middle of all that craziness, the Red Warriors ended up becoming the biggest gold mine in the country. But the poor guy missed that golden opportunity because of his own stupidity and spent the rest of his days bitter with regret. But now everything was going to be different, and he wasn't letting this new opportunity slip through his fingers no matter what. Now he walks alongside his friend, dead set on joining the Red Warriors at any cost. It was the start of his second life, and the first step was getting his hands on some serious cash to start investing. When they arrive, a stocky guy with a red bandana greets him with a handshake, welcoming him to the group. Our guy bows awkwardly and says he's excited to work with them and that this is his first time. But on the inside, he was wearing a twisted grin, convinced that this time around, he would finally pull off his great escape. Meanwhile, back on the bridge where it all started, a silhouette watched over the city in the dead of night. It was the bizarre old man, looking satisfied to see that the boy was acting exactly as he had expected. However, on his tablet from the Great Escape Service, a file called the Karma Collection showed that the boy's fate had already been sealed. The old man bursts out laughing, saying he put together a special treatment that would have the poor guy crying non-stop. The night before the group's meeting, Bando reflects on how he always hated those stories about people going back in time. After all, he thought it was stupid to know the future and still fail, but now he was seeing how different it was in practice. After all, memories were worthless if he had no money to act on them. His family lived in a crumbling old house on the outskirts of Seoul, barely scraping together enough to pay rent. His dad could barely keep himself afloat working as a security guard after the financial crisis, bringing home next to nothing each month. Meanwhile, his mom worked herself to the bone in a construction site kitchen for an insultingly low hourly wage. On TV, the government talked about resilience and a new era for the country, but it all felt like a sick joke to him. The truth was that his family's reality was one of crushing poverty, with absolutely no way out in sight. So the moment he got back to the past, our guy made up his mind to change that situation once and for all. He promised himself he would make it in this new life, no matter what it took. But without any capital, tapping into some rich family's wealth was a fantasy that only happened in soap operas. Without being a genius or someone with a special skill, he wonders how an average guy like him could ever find a path to wealth. But the answer to that question was obvious, and everyone already knew it: the crypto market. The problem was that digital currencies were still a good 10 years away from showing up and exploding in value. He wonders if it would be right to just sit on his hands and wait. Determined not to make any mistakes, he starts researching everything he could find out about what was happening in the world at that time. He looked up news about the international scene, the Olympics, and any other major events he could remember. And to his relief, every single detail he'd written down lined up perfectly with the memories he had from his previous life. But one question still haunted him: what if his own actions ended up changing the future somehow? With his life on the line, Bando needed hard proof to know whether the future would play out exactly as he remembered. And the best way to test that would be to use the events of the 2002 World Cup, which was still 2 years away. With that plan in mind, he heads straight to the group's meeting spot, a fried chicken joint. When he walks in, the stocky leader spots him right away, saying he'd heard a lot about him through Hyun Seok. Our guy immediately flashes a grin, because he knows this is where he'll pick up valuable intel and the perfect connections for his future. His first plan was to throw out a few revolutionary ideas from the future to win the respect and trust of everyone in the group. And then, he'd use the national team's game results to confirm whether everything was still following the original timeline. All hyped up, Bando introduces himself with a big smile and promises he'll give it his all in whatever they need him to do. He even mentions that he already put together a few ideas that could help the fan club. That's when a tipsy old man in glasses comes stumbling in, hugging Hyun Seok and thrilled that he brought a new friend. But the moment the man lays eyes on Bando, the good vibes vanish completely. Shaking with rage, the old guy zeroes in his fury directly on our protagonist. And without giving him any time to react, the old man lands a heavy punch right in the middle of the poor guy's face. The old man shouts, demanding to know how this lowlife has the nerve to show up wearing the enemy team's colors. But since he's an old man, he ends up falling over from the effort. Drawn in by the commotion, a blonde girl comes running over. The leader points to Bando's shirt, and the blonde, named Mina, is stunned when she realizes the massive blunder the newcomer just pulled. She explains that the orange shirt he's wearing is the Netherlands jersey, the team that destroyed Korea in the last World Cup. Hyun Seok tries to smooth things over, making up a story that his friend just got confused because he's colorblind. Just kidding, that's my own joke. But Mina isn't buying it and yells, asking how he doesn't even know the rival team that crushed them 5-0. Desperate, Bando realizes things have gone south fast, and he needs to find a way to fix this mess. To try and save himself, he shouts that he knows a ton about soccer and rattles off names that won't be famous until the future, like Hiddink and Son. With a terrifying look, Mina grabs him by the collar and demands to know how the opposing coach could be a hero and who the hell Son even is. Only then does it finally hit him that it's still the year 2000. Trying to break the tension and salvage the evening, the leader raises his glass of beer and proposes a toast to the future of Korean soccer. Everyone perks up immediately and clinks glasses with enthusiasm. While the rest of the group drinks and has a good time, our guy stays tense at the table, trying to drown his embarrassment in alcohol. But his rotten luck strikes again, making the poor guy choke and spit his drink everywhere. Bando is completely done for, and at this rate, he'll eat a little chicken and go straight home. That's when Mina walks over, The group's secretary stares him down and asks point blank what he's even doing there. When he gets a good look at her up close, our protagonist is completely starstruck by how gorgeous she is, barely able to string two thoughts together. Trying to hide his nerves, he bows and says he really loves Korean soccer and wants to help the national team however he can. With a dismissive look, Mina rests her chin on her hand and challenges what a clueless student like him could possibly do for them. Bando gets fired up and shoots back that even without knowing a ton about soccer, anyone with good ideas can come up with cheers and chants. Then he slams his glass down on the table, throws his arms up and shouts out the team's famous battle cry, expecting everyone to be blown away right then and there. But the girl just keeps chewing her chicken without a single flicker of interest. She reveals that they've already been using that chant for years, borrowed it from another team back in '96. The poor guy starts to sweat as he realizes his brilliant, groundbreaking idea is actually completely outdated. Desperate, he throws his fists up again and suggests another famous cheer. But before he can even finish yelling it, Mina grabs his nose hard. She tells him that one's already been done too, lifted from another fan club back in '95. Wiping the blood from his nose, our hero hears Mina call him out for just pretending to know everything based on gossip he picked up around town. Head spinning, he panics when he finds out that the most famous chants already existed in the year 2000. He was completely convinced that all of those had been invented just for the 2002 World Cup. To make the humiliation even worse, the girl pins him to the floor and starts listing a bunch of other chants that have been around since '97. With a mischievous little grin, she leans in close to his face, and out of nowhere, she grabs his cheek and gives it a hard pinch and pull. With a threatening smile and an intimidating presence, she tells him to eat his chicken and get out. With tears in his eyes from both the physical and emotional pain, the guy refuses to accept that things would end this pathetically. He realizes his whole plan is crashing and burning, but then suddenly a brand new brilliant idea pops into his head. Without wasting a second, he starts frantically tearing up several pieces of paper. Right after that, he grabs a bottle of red sauce and starts painting the papers using a stick. Curious and intrigued, Mina wonders what kind of madness this guy is up to now. That's when Bando holds up his new creation and asks what she thinks of a revolutionary idea like this. After studying the papers, Mina flatly asks if it's just a card section, and he confirms, explaining that the idea is to cover an entire side of the stadium with a mosaic to send a powerful message. Mina mutters that this is absolutely insane, coming from a high school student, and she explains that even at well-rehearsed school sporting events, pulling off a flawless mosaic is already incredibly difficult. And she adds that it takes months of practice with hundreds of dedicated people, making it totally impractical to do with a random crowd. Bando agrees that pulling off complex designs in the stands would honestly be nearly impossible. But he argues that if people simply hold solid-colored cards in specific seats, it would be much more doable to pull off. He knows he needs to win this group over no matter what, because his entire future depends on this decision. With that, Bando stands up and gives a passionate speech, saying the whole world would be watching and would see their nation's message. He shouts that they'd make a massive flag covering the entire stand, showing the power of the fans. And with dramatic tears streaming down his face, he drops the line that the most important thing is having an unshakable heart. That's when the stocky leader walks up behind Bando and puts a hand on his shoulder. The man pulls our guy into a bear hug, fully agreeing that heart and passion were what truly mattered. Mina completely loses it and screams at everyone at the table, asking if they're all drunk to be falling for a load of nonsense like that. Suddenly, the group's president tells everyone to pipe down. The man gives a poetic speech, saying that despair kills youth and that without youth, the whole country dies too. He puts his hand on Mina's shoulder and asks if anyone there had pitched a more dynamic and bold idea than what the young guy just came up with. Seeing the president defend the newcomer so powerfully, Mina turns completely red. Then, he takes off his glasses and drives home that everyone needs to contribute what they can, never pulling others down. Well, Bando can barely believe just how outlandish and eccentric this guy is. The leader turns to him, with his arms crossed, and, with a piercing look, asks what this brave young man's name is. Our guy quickly snaps to attention and introduces himself in a loud voice, saying his name is Han Bando. Hearing the name, the man starts laughing and shaking all over. A second later, he lets out a booming laugh that echoes through the whole restaurant, and grabs Bando by the shoulders with excitement, saying he already knew he was something special, and that even his name proved he was one of them. Without missing a beat, the eccentric leader shoves his hand into his jeans pocket and reveals a red wristband, explaining it belonged to a very important member of the group who had left. The man extends his hand and offers the fan accessory, asking if the kid is willing to step into that open role. Bando realizes this is his last shot to fully commit to the fan group, and that he has to accept no matter what. With that, he accepts and takes the wristband, and just like that, time flew by, until they finally made it to the long-awaited year of 2002. He now had a traditional fan group drum in his hands, However, the start of that fan journey wasn't exactly the walk in the park he was expecting. Bando spent the last 2 years doing absolutely nothing, but frantically banging on that drum without saving a single penny. The only thing he got out of all that effort was stronger forearms. Now in 2002, he starts truly spiraling over the ridiculous situation he got himself into. With his head spinning from worry, he remembers that the World Cup is starting the very next month, and on top of that, the news only kept showing losses for the national team, filling Bando with serious doubts about the team's future. Faced with so much uncertainty, the poor guy starts seriously thinking about cutting his losses and walking away from the Red Warriors. He figures that if he started grinding it out as a convenience store clerk, he could save up enough money to start investing. Or if things went sideways, he could always land a regular office job somewhere and climb the corporate ladder. He'd have to put up with all the daily corporate nonsense, but it still seemed like a way more realistic plan than what he had now. Torn between the life of a die-hard fan and a soul-crushing corporate future, he wonders if he should just change course once and for all. Out of nowhere, a voice starts shouting his name. It was his faithful friend Hyunseok. The friend puts a hand on his shoulder. Seeing the state the guy was in, Hyunseok asks with some concern whether he was feeling sick or in pain. Our guy looks away and admits, his face breaking into a cold sweat, that he's been feeling off lately. That's when his companion reveals that everyone around him had been worried about his strange behavior in recent days. Too tired to keep up the act, Bando drops his head and says he's going through a midlife crisis. He opens up that he feels like a complete idiot for throwing his life away and never picking up any useful skills. But as his answer to all that drama, Hyunseok swings a solid punch right into the poor guy's cheek. The friend calls him a coward for keeping everything bottled up inside, and reminds him that back in school, he was the one who pushed them both to bet everything on the fan club to make money. And now that things were about to fall into place, it made absolutely no sense for him to be sitting there alone, wallowing in his funk. Hyunseok demands to know what's really going on so he can be prepared in case the guy decides to join the military. That's when the group's leader interrupts the conversation by calling for Hyunseok. Now alone in the stands, Bando realizes that even if he told the truth about coming from the future, his friend would never believe a word of it. Gripping his drumstick tightly, he finds himself in a dead end with no real answer besides finding some kind of manual labor. He worries that if he gives up on the plan, he might create an alternate future where even crypto never exists. After all, he'd already suffered through every miserable year of those high school days, and living in that old era without modern smartphones was suffocating in a way he could barely stand. For him, those old streets had zero charm and felt more like a jungle. He eyes a job posting for an internet cafe, but the hourly wage is an absolute joke. As someone who grew up wired to constant dopamine hits in the future, grinding away in early 2000s PCs was its own kind of hell. Without the crypto boom and without any starting capital to invest, there was simply no way for him to get ahead. He agonizes over whether his precious second shot at life would be wasted in such a pointless way. The poor guy starts seriously considering taking another one of those pills to go back in time again. Out of nowhere, the referee's whistle blows and the national team's game kicks off. Deciding to forget his problems for a moment, Bando throws his worries aside and starts hammering the drum like a madman. On the field, the national team players surge forward with everything they've got, fighting for every play with incredible intensity. Player Hwang charges into the attack at full speed and launches a spectacular shot toward the goal, showing a level of play far beyond any of their previous games. The crowd goes absolutely wild, screaming at the top of their lungs to cheer on the players. Nearby, the reporter tells her crew that the Warrior squad seemed so much lighter and focused that day. Hearing her voice, Bando spins around and freezes, completely blown away by the reporter's stunning looks. She explains that the coach had saved the team's energy in the previous friendly against China, which ended in a draw. Arms crossed, she adds that they need to deliver now. At that very moment, the guy snaps his attention back to the field, startled to see another dangerous attack building up. Player Lee Chun-soo takes control of the ball and races full speed toward the box, finding himself one-on-one with the goal. He winds up for a right-footed strike and kicks with everything he's got. But the ball clips the outside of the net, and the referee quickly calls offside on the play, wiping it all out. The reporter gripes about the player's aim, while meanwhile, Bando's soul nearly leaves his body after that missed opportunity. Right after that, the same player gets the ball back and tries to push forward again along the edge of the box. He lofts a high cross toward the 6-yard box, trying to find a teammate to head it in. But the pass goes completely off target and falls right at the feet of the opposing defender. Bando completely loses it in the stands, screaming at the player and asking if his foot is made of triangles. Realizing his hopes were pointless, and that the scoreline that day would be disappointing again, he breaks down crying, but right after he pulls himself together and reminds himself the game isn't over yet. Bando lets out a thunderous roar and starts absolutely destroying the drum, firing up the crowd around him. The nation's battle cry creates a simply unbelievable atmosphere. In the broadcast booth, the reporter flags a looming threat from the opposing side. But with a perfectly timed sliding tackle, Korea's defender throws himself on the ground and blocks the shot at just the right moment. Player Yu Sam-sheol wins the ball back in style and charges forward quickly, launching a deadly counterattack. With class and precision, he sends a long pinpoint pass soaring toward the opposing penalty area. To the defense's surprise, Lee Chun-soo bursts into space to receive the ball in the perfect position. In the stands, the reporter and Bando both beg him not to waste this chance. One-on-one with the goalkeeper, the striker shoots across the body with composure, making the entire stadium hold its breath. The ball rolls smoothly into the back of the net, opening the scoring and putting the Korea national team ahead against Scotland. The stadium simply erupts in a deafening celebration. Out of her mind with emotion, the beautiful reporter grabs our guy by the shoulder and jumps up with him. With that, Bando feels like things are finally going to be different today. Taking advantage of the moment, the journalist goes live, highlighting the incredible energy of the crowd in the first half. As soon as the camera cuts, she sighs and says she's giving everything she has to do a great job out here. That's when the cameraman gets her attention, pointing at the field and telling her the players are already heading back out for the second half. And to everyone's surprise, star player An Jung-won takes the field, turning heads with his commanding presence as always. Watching him, our guy immediately remembers how this player would become an absolute legend during the World Cup. The second half kicks off with a bang, and the new striker already takes control of the ball and pushes into the attack. With a quick movement, the star player sets himself and unleashes a spectacular left-footed volley toward the goal. The ball rockets into the back of the net, pushing the score to 2-0. The star celebrates with his signature move, kissing his hand and running to embrace his teammates on the field. The reporter screams and jumps in the broadcast booth. Well, the way the game was going matched Bando's memories. But one cruel doubt still gnaws at him. What if joining the fan group had changed the national team's future? He figures that if the goals he watched so many times on TV keep happening, he's on the right track. But the poor guy nearly has a heart attack when he hears the reporter complaining about another controversial substitution by the coach. But then the star comes through again, and Yoon Young-won scores the third goal, capping off the historic blowout for the Korean national team. The reporter starts going absolutely wild, screaming that this was pure magic from the coach. But the joy is short-lived, because Scotland immediately scores a consolation goal, cutting the lead to 3-1. The mood in the broadcast booth gets tense again, and the journalist starts sweating, fearing that the future had been changed. For real, our guy spirals into a panic when he realizes he doesn't remember that goal. He squeezes his drumstick and tries to force his mind to recall any detail about that match. Without being able to think clearly, the poor guy decides to slam himself hard in the head to see if his memories come back. The blow is so hard it cuts open his forehead, leaving the journalist next to him completely horrified. Even with his vision going blurry, he focuses on the field and sees the set play start, with a quick pass toward the team's star. On the field, the striker receives the ball with his back to the defense, tightly surrounded by opposing defenders. But with incredible agility, he spins sharply off the ball, leaving his marker behind with absolutely no chance to react. And in that moment, Bando feels like this move is already drawn out perfectly in his mind. Suddenly, he flashes back to when he was on the bridge in his old life, drinking and mindlessly scrolling through his phone out of sheer boredom. That miserable night, he had been watching old soccer clips, including the iconic moments from the 2002 World Cup. That's when it all clicks, and he realizes he already knows every single second of this historic play by heart. The move unfolds exactly like the video, with a perfect triangle pass that completely dismantles Scotland's defense. Right after, the striker sprints forward to receive the ball, ready to finish with style. And with a delicate, brilliant touch, he chips the opposing goalkeeper with an absolutely spectacular lob. Bando remembers the exact title of the YouTube video, which showed Korea's dominant 4-1 victory. On the field, the goalkeeper leaps desperately to get to the ball, but it's already out of his reach. The ball hits the back of the net, confirming the fourth goal and cementing the historic rout for the national team. With that, Bando realizes there was no butterfly effect, and that the future was still playing out exactly as he remembered. The referee blows the final whistle, confirming the dominant victory and sending the entire stadium into a full-on celebration. Swept up in pure excitement, the poor guy closes his eyes and puckers up, ready to plant a kiss on the gorgeous reporter. But in the rush, he misses his target completely and plants a big kiss directly on the cameraman's cheek with his eyes shut. Under a shower of fireworks, the crowd celebrates, while Bando is already thinking about his future fortune. 5 days later, the delegation heads out for the next friendly. Bando and the other 20 elite members of the Red Warriors touch down. The horde of fans finally sets foot on Jeju, but the truth was that, despite the excitement of arriving, the atmosphere among the group's leaders was tense. and all that tension had one very clear reason. The national team's next opponent was the formidable and powerful England. On the way to the stadium, the fan buses rolled through the streets, carrying the anxiety of thousands of supporters. Lost in thought, our hero reflects on the might of the inventors of the game, who always stepped onto the field as favorites to win it all. He starts drooling, just thinking about legends like Beckham and Owen, imagining the astronomical fortune those two stars were worth combined. Suddenly, the poor guy ends up making a beeline to the bathroom with a serious stomachache. While cleaning up, he reasons that facing massive teams is the best way to show what the group is truly capable of. With his face washed and the red bandana tied around his head, he decides there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of from here on out. When he steps into the stands and looks out at the pitch, Bando knows that from this moment on, it all comes down to unshakable belief. But not everyone felt that way, and one of the fans asks the leader if this friendly against England isn't just too much for where they're at. The group worries, saying the coach should focus on easier games to build the team's confidence before the World Cup. On the stadium TV, the reporter announces that the Korean Warriors are ready to take on the biggest stars in the world. Hearing that, Mina goes off, yelling that the coach must be out of his mind thinking they're invincible just because they beat Scotland. But the stocky leader puts a hand on her shoulder and calms her down, saying with a smile that they'll only find out the answer if they try. With that touch, the blonde completely drops her tough girl act. Seeing the drama, our hero tightens his grip on his drumstick and tells Mina not to stress over this tough matchup. Bando assures her that their national team won't go down easily against the English. Suddenly, she smacks him hard on the back of the head, laughing out loud and giving him credit for finally waking up. Even so, Mina asks how on earth they could possibly go head-to-head with England. Bando starts explaining that, while England has superstars, their new coach's tactics focus on teamwork. And since team play demands coordination, Korea had the upper hand from surviving 2 years of Hiddink's relentless training. On top of that, he points out that European players were exhausted from facing brutally draining domestic leagues. Since the Korean national team had saved their energy for the World Cup, that gave them a huge advantage in terms of physical stamina. The leader cracks up and puts Bando in a playful headlock, praising the brilliant breakdown the guy just delivered. But on the inside, Bando was only thinking about telling everyone to keep their eyes on young Park, who was about to become the biggest legend the country had ever seen. Suddenly, the deafening sound of the referee's whistle echoes through the entire stadium, kicking off the highly anticipated showdown. On the field, the English players start moving quickly, but the Korean defender stretches out and throws in a precise sliding tackle on the grass, fighting for possession. Then, goalkeeper Lee Hoon-jae shows off lightning reflexes with an absolutely spectacular save. In the stands, Mina celebrates with the leader, saying that the team's brutal training sessions were finally paying off big time. But England doesn't back down and tries to organize another dangerous attack through the midfield with their number 20. But Korea's defense reacts fast, swarming the opponent aggressively and cutting off every passing option. Applying their famous high-pressure system, the Korean Warriors strip the ball and win back possession in style. Our guy reminds himself not to panic and to trust in the future he already knows. He has complete confidence that Hiddink's aggressive strategy will pay off. But on a quick counter, England's prodigy breaks free down the flank. That's when defender Song Jong-guk comes in without mercy and strips the English star clean. Seeing the fire from the players on the pitch, the Red Warriors leader takes off his glasses and decides the crowd needs to bring it too. With authority, he gestures to the sides and orders them to immediately launch into the famous wave to set the stadium on fire. Right away, the Sea of Red throws up their arms in unison, sending a massive human wave rippling through the stands. Our hero grips his drumstick tightly, picturing the road to the semifinals as the launch pad for his future fortune. Meanwhile, on the pitch, another powerful shot is fired toward the Korean goal area. Completely in his own world, Bando starts going to town on the drum right next to Mina. Caught off guard by all that energy, the girl turns around and watches the lunatic's face with a certain admiration. But danger creeps back in when English midfielder Scholes receives a sharp pass and charges at full speed toward goal. He quickly sets up the shot and unleashes a rocket, but Korea's defense throws themselves in heroically to block the ball's path. But the ball bounces high in the box, leaving the entire stadium in dead silence. On the rebound, a foot comes out of nowhere. And to everyone's horror, Owen throws himself on the ground and manages to poke it into the back of the net, opening the score for England. In the stands, Mina and the leader are absolutely beside themselves, tearing their hair out and screaming that the level of world soccer is just too damn high. But Bando keeps banging his drum without missing a beat, telling them it's way too early to give in to that kind of negativity. He explains to the two that the opposing team only managed to score that goal because of pure luck. Hearing the confidence in the guy's words, Mina and the leader settle down. A second later, the leader puffs out his chest and lets out a thunderous roar, leading the stands with even more intensity. The entire stadium answers the call, thousands of voices joining in a powerful chorus that echoes across the whole island of Jeju. Even with the scoreboard showing a 1-0 deficit heading into the end of the first half, the Korean fans kept singing nonstop. On the field, the Korean players start a quick passing exchange. That's when the number 14 player adjusts his body and sends a high, pinpoint cross toward the middle of the box. Stars from both teams look up, jockeying for the best position to see who would get to the ball first. Suddenly, the Korean forward gets ahead of Beckham's challenge and redirects the ball with a precise header. The deflection finds the young and promising number 21 player, who was sneaking in unmarked as a total wildcard. With a stunning and heroic diving header, he throws himself at the ball and heads it hard into the corner, past the English goalkeeper. The ball goes straight into the back of the net, tying the match and sending the entire stadium into a complete frenzy. Now, certain that everything was playing out exactly as he remembered, Bando feels a little more at ease. The testing phase was over. It was time to cash in. Next to him, Mina and the leader were crying from sheer emotion, screaming that this goal showed the true fighting spirit of the Korean people. In the middle of all that noise, Bando's phone starts buzzing in his pocket. He pulls it out and smiles when he sees his friend Hyun-seok's name lighting up the screen. But the moment he picks up, Bando is hit with a wall of curses from Hyun-seok. His friend yells so loud that the guy has to pull the phone away from his ear fast to avoid going deaf. Then he puts it back to his ear and complains that he can't make out a single thing the guy is saying. With that, Bando decides to step out of the noisy stands. Already in a quieter spot, he asks what the problem was, since he gave him every detail of the plan. But Hyun-seok gets even more worked up, asking how he has the nerve to say that after everything he put him through. The kid complains that he followed the instructions and ran around factories all over the place, looking for red fabric like a complete lunatic. Hyun-seok reveals that at one of the factories in Daegu, the workers called him a con artist, and he even got slapped hard across the face. He wants to know why they can't just buy ready-made shirts at the Dongdaemun market and stamp their brand on those. He pushes to know why Bando wants to buy rolls of red fabric in bulk and in such a massive quantity, and adds that to close a deal with the major textile mills, they'd need to put down a deposit of 10 million won, an astronomical sum that he definitely doesn't have. On the other end, the friend drives home that amount is completely out of their reach. On top of that, he explains that competition, because of the World Cup, has gone insane, and the factory owner needs an answer by Tuesday. Hyun-seok points out that they already burned through all the club funds on the warehouse, and asks how they're going to come up with 10 million. Bando goes quiet, frustrated that his ambitious plan to turn his life around might be derailed by such a trivial amount. That's when, as he takes a step to the side, he ends up stepping on an old newspaper. But the moment he focuses on that crumpled piece of paper, a genuinely brilliant idea starts forming in his mind. The front page headline featured a story about sports betting, highlighting a historic jackpot of 188 times the original bet. It was the exact way out he needed. Well, even in the darkest moments, fate always finds a way. Without wasting a second, he snatches up the crumpled newspaper and calls for his friend, but Hyun-seok just won't stop cursing him out. Flashing a wild grin, Bando tells his friend to go ahead and sign the textile contract, assuring him the money is as good as won. Hyun-seok completely loses it, screaming at his partner to wake up and asking if he thinks running a business is some kind of game. He demands to know how the guy plans to come up with all that cash. Sighing, our guy says there's no point explaining the details right now and tells him he's already on his way to where he is. Bando hangs up and starts running through the corridor, saying to catch the next flight and to wait for him until tomorrow morning. As Bando walks away, a mysterious figure watches him from a distance at the end of the corridor. The next day, at the textile factory in Gyeonggi, the owner stared at the two young men with complete disbelief. Studying the papers in his hands, the man asks if they're really going to make the down payment next week and the rest within 15 days. And assuring him they'd meet the deadline. Bando asks the owner to trust in their company's plan. The man could see the kid seemed confident, but he still hesitated to do business with such green newcomers. That's when Hyun-seok steps up and gives a speech, reminding him that Bill Gates also started from nothing before turning Microsoft into a global giant. With that, the businessman starts warming up to the chubby kid's pitch, which reminded him a lot of his own scrappy youth. But when he takes a good look at Bando, the man gets a bad feeling, thinking the pale, hollow look in that kid's eyes was exactly what a future betrayer looks like. Brushing off his suspicions, the owner decides to take the risk, stamping a red seal firmly on the page and accepting the bold proposal from the two young men. He points a finger and warns them sternly that they have exactly 1 week, and that if they're late, the penalty fee will be massive. Relieved, both partners thank the boss by cheering out loud, bowing respectfully to show their gratitude for the big opportunity they just landed. A few hours later, night falls over Bando's small, humble rooftop apartment. While eating some meat, Hyun-seok asks, surprised, whether Bando's dad could really lend them that kind of cash. and he reveals that his dad had secretly set aside a life insurance policy to cover his future tuition. Hyun-sik freaks out with excitement, yelling that this sneaky Bando was out of his mind for only dropping that bombshell now. But Bando deflects and throws a chili pepper at his friend, complaining that he only found out about that money himself not too long ago. Hyun-seok cracks up laughing, but on the inside, Bando was silently apologizing for hiding the fact that he'd used the rest of the club's funds to bet everything on sports betting. He reflects that, in his previous life before going back, he had picked up a very important lesson. He knew very well that his own manic face and bizarre grins gave off absolutely zero trustworthiness when it came to closing deals with people. But with a genuinely honest and likable guy like Hyun-seok as the face of the business, he was confident he could make it all work out. Taking a swig of beer, his friend curiously asks how a clueless guy like Bando came up with such a genius idea to resell red fabric. Our guy chugs the rest of his can and asks his friend if he really knew what money was all about. Well, Bando explains that money always flows to wherever people gather in massive numbers. He lets out a loud laugh, saying the others would do all the work for him, and confirms that was the pure wisdom of the ancients. But the truth was that he was thinking of a shady neighbor who used to flaunt a ton of cash he won betting on that friendly against France. His eyes light up, remembering the unbelievable 360 times return for anyone who got the exact 3-2 comeback score right. Back in the moment, the two clink their drinks happily up on the rooftop, with Hyun-seok toasting the birth of a new dynasty of millionaires in the country. A week later, at the Suwon Stadium, the sea of red fans had gathered once again. On the field, the French stars walk out looking somewhat downcast, and the broadcast announces that star player Zidane is sitting out due to an injury. In the stands, Mina turns to the leader and asks if he's managing to lead the cheers on his own at such a critical moment, and the man grumbles at Bando for vanishing at the most important time. But the blonde tries to defend the newcomer, saying he had warned them that his sudden disappearance was a matter of survival. Meanwhile, scattered throughout the crowd, several fans were getting heated after finding out Bando had borrowed money from everyone there. Hiding under a dark cap in the middle of the crowd, Bando himself had to watch everything in silence because his entire life was riding on the final score. The stadium scoreboard announces the end of the first half, showing the surprising lead of Korea 2-1 against the mighty French side. Adjusting his earphones with a grin, he celebrates quietly for having nailed the exact score in the first half. Right after, the referee blows the whistle to start the second half. The French come roaring back into the game, putting relentless pressure on Korea's defense right from the opening minutes of the final period. The defenders fight for every inch of the pitch with ferocity, winning every aerial duel in a true test of grit. But the pressure works, and the French striker tucks the ball into the back of the net with a clean finish inside the Korean box. With the equalizer making it 2-2, the stadium falls silent. Then in the dying minutes, disaster strikes, and France scores the go-ahead goal to make it 3-2, silencing the entire stand for good. The French players go absolutely wild on the pitch, celebrating the stunning winner from their defender. Watching France's third goal go in, our guy feels certain the 3-2 scoreline is locked in for good. But out of nowhere, a collective roar from the stands makes him freeze on the spot. On the field, the Korean players surround the referee, waving their arms and protesting an obvious foul on the play. Well, the match was already deep into stoppage time and was seconds away from ending. The crowd around him starts screaming desperately for a penalty, leaving Bando in complete shock at this sudden twist. He breaks into a cold sweat of panic, knowing that if Korea tied it up at 3-3, his bet would be totally ruined. But the referee holds firm with a steady, unshakable stance, completely ignoring the overwhelming pressure from the players and the fans. Desperate at the thought of losing everything, our guy starts cursing out the referee with pure hatred, praying he doesn't call anything. Not fully understanding the chaos, he taps the shoulder of a fan next to him and asks what the hell just happened on the field. And the girl grabs him by the collar, screaming that the blind referee was flat out pretending not to see a blatant call. She yells that the French player had practically played basketball with his hands in the box. But to Bando's relief, the referee ignores the protests and blows the final whistle, sealing Korea's loss by 3-2. So a twisted smile spreads across Bando's face. He fakes outrage to blend in, but on the inside he's celebrating that the plan worked and starts casually walking toward the stadium exit. That's when his cap falls off. He bends down quickly to grab it, but a hand reaches out and hands the cap back to him before he can get to it. Bando looks up with a gentle smile to thank whoever did that, but a deep, ominous voice cuts through, coldly asking if he really thinks making money like that counts as hard work. When he looks up, the poor guy nearly has a breakdown, coming face to face with the divine old man, now disguised with a fan headband shaped like devil horns. Without saying a word, the bizarre creature simply places the cap back on the young man's head. Then, the old man turns around and lectures him that true effort demands blood and sweat, and that simply riding the luck of his own memories was cheating. The guy quickly pushes back and asks what else he could possibly do in such a tough spot, and reflects that grinding it out the honest way had never gotten him anywhere in his previous life. Nothing but failure. Irritated at being called out, he turns around and confronts the entity, reminding him that he was the one who gave him this second shot to live life to the fullest. He points to the crowd and shouts that fighting desperately using every tool available is also a valid form of effort. So our guy flips the old man off, but of course the old man doesn't care and treats the whole thing as some of the most entertaining content he's seen in a while. A few days later, at the partner's textile warehouse in Dongdaemun, the two were meeting up. Hyun-seok was still nervous, questioning whether they were really doing the right with all that investment. Bando rests his chin on his hand, admitting that the divine old man's mysterious words from the night before wouldn't leave his head. He wonders about what would happen if he kept pressing his luck. But pushing the dark thoughts away, he decides the success of their business has to be the only priority right now. Bando answers a call in a professional manner, presenting the location as their import company. Next to him, Hyun-seok swallows hard and watches it all unfold. Our guy jots down the client's order, confirming a large-scale sale of tons of cotton fabric and synthetic materials. But he nearly falls over when the client confirms the total order would be 5 tons. Hyun-seok also completely freaks out at the enormous quantity, quickly doing the math in his head and realizing the final profit would be simply astronomical. While his friends celebrated, Bando was wondering whether making money using knowledge from the future was really just a lucky twist of fate. But he quickly shakes off the doubt, concluding that it was simply his own special skill, and swears he won't fall into these pointless, second-guessing moments again. With a firm, decisive handshake between the two partners, the success pact for their new company was officially sealed. They celebrate that they're finally rich and ready to take over the entire fabric market. A few days later, the TV was announcing Korea's historic victory over Italy, sending the whole nation into a frenzy over the World Cup. But suddenly, a remote control is hurled full force at the TV screen. Bando's dad huffs with rage, complaining that the only male heir of the Han family is wasting his time with that damn soccer game. The man was furious that his son hadn't shown up on the day of the late grandfather's memorial ceremony. Holding the portrait of the deceased, the father cries, saying he felt guilty for not having raised his son right. But Bando's mom shouts from the kitchen, complaining that there are already way too many ceremonies in this house, and that he shouldn't put so much pressure on the kid. She sets a bowl of chestnuts on the table and tells the husband to stop grumbling and go peel the things if he has so much time on his hands. That's when someone knocks at the door. Furious, the father grabs a broom and storms toward the front gate, fully determined to give that lazy son of his a piece of his mind for daring to be late. He yanks the door open violently, yelling at the top of his lungs, asking if the boy had any idea what an important day it was for the whole family. But a second later, the couple freezes in the doorway, completely speechless at the unbelievable sight right in front of them. There stood Bando, wearing a sharp suit and holding an enormous luxurious gift box, radiating an aura of success. With a calm, mature expression, the boy announces that the one and only grandson and heir of the Han family had finally come home. Later, night falls over Bando's father's modest home. The three of them sit in silence in the living room. The father stares down the young man and demands to know what the hell he's been up to show up looking like that. He shouts that he sacrificed everything to pay for Bando's education, only to watch him drop out and show up in that red shirt. Blinded by his son's disrespect, the man raises his hand with full force, ready to deliver a smack, but the mother steps in and stops the blow at the very last second. Desperate, the woman begs him in tears to get down on his knees and apologize to his father right now. Even with the corner of his mouth bleeding, Bando stays completely calm and asks his father for a moment to talk like an adult. He bows respectfully on the living room rug. Then he places a bank savings book on the table, his personal seal and the keys to a brand new car. That's when the young man explains that he used his connections to open a small but successful clothing business. He reveals that this is just the first payoff from his hard work and that he brought everything there as a gift of gratitude for the two of them. Skeptical, the father grabs the key fob and points it toward the window, pressing the button to see if the car is actually real. Meanwhile, the mother opens the savings book and nearly falls over when she sees the absurd number of zeros in the account balance. Our guy decides that from that moment on, his only mission would be to make up for all the suffering his parents went through. Hearing that, the parents' faces light up completely, forgetting all the anger they felt just seconds ago. Bando gets up to change and help with the grandfather's memorial, but the loud ring of his phone interrupts the moment once again. He answers quickly, explaining to his parents that it was an urgent business call from director Hyun-seok about their company. But now, with a huge grin from ear to ear, the father tells his son to focus on work and assures him he can handle the whole ceremony by himself. Our guy excuses himself and slips quietly out of the room, while the father shouts after him that work has to always be a young person's top priority. The moment he steps out the door, the couple stands there, watching their son go. A second later, the two embrace each other, sobbing with joy, shouting out loud about how proud they are of the family's new big-time entrepreneur. Outside, Bando answers the call and hears the cheerful voice of his business partner, who sounds like he's celebrating their success in a big way. Hyun-seok was happily drinking with his parents, celebrating the fact that he had finally become the great pride of his family. Even so, Bando asks his partner not to go overboard with the drinking and to keep up the professional image of a director. He reminds his friend that they needed to be fully on their game for the meeting with the factory owners tomorrow. Later, lying back in his bedroom, Bando was resting on a literal mountain of cash. He was about to watch the best moments of the World Cup on TV. Meanwhile, Hyun-seok was using a giant dustpan to scoop up the pile of bills scattered all over the bedroom floor. That's when he starts trembling and throws himself to his knees on the bed, screaming that Bando is an absolute business genius. He acts out the exclusivity deal they made at the textile mill, reminiscing about how they closed the deal of a lifetime. Rolling around wildly on the cash-covered mattress, the friend cracks up, remembering the look on the factory owner's face. But Bando flicks a bottle cap at him, telling his partner to knock it off with all the childish dramatics. Well, it had all gone down 3 hours earlier at the textile mill in Yangju, when the two partners had stacked a massive pile of cash on the table. The businessman was sweating bullets and shaking in disbelief at the sight of so much real money, barely able to believe that the promised payment was real. But with his eyes gleaming, Bando stepped right up to the man and assured him he wasn't planning to stop there. In a theatrical move, he raised his arms and announced he would add another 50 million won as an upfront advance on the contract. The young man aggressively opened his backpack and tossed more thick stacks of cash onto the table. The textile mill owner looked like he was about to have a heart attack, completely overwhelmed by all that financial firepower. Bando drove home that there was no tricks involved and that this was proof of his company's seriousness. He locked eyes with the man in an intimidating stare, making it crystal clear that from that moment on, he would only do business with them. Nearly in tears, the owner swore he never doubted their honesty for a second, and so agreed to tie the fate of his factory to the success of Tyeoksang. With that, Bando starts pushing the stacks of cash to officially close the exclusive purchase of all the fabric. Sealing the deal, he slips a stack of bonus cash directly into the businessman's vest pocket. In the background, the chubby one shouts that Bando is the greatest business genius and the true mogul of his generation. But back in the present, our guy tells his partner to tone it down, reminding him that this was just the beginning of their climb. On the bedroom TV, Coach Hiddink was giving a historic press conference, declaring his famous line about still being hungry. With a focused look, Bando tells Hyun-seok that his own hunger for success and power is only just starting to truly wake up. While eating in bed, our hero starts mapping out his next strategic moves to dominate the future financial market. He knows that the initial goal of building up the capital to invest in crypto had already been met at a shockingly fast pace. With this new shot at life in his hands, he reflects that he needs to think even bigger and expand his reach to the whole world. To reach the ultimate heights that the future had in store, the guy understands that money alone won't be enough for his plans. He needed to build a powerful network with the most influential and wealthy people in that 2002 society. And he realizes that diving headfirst into the national team's fan group was the perfect stepping stone to reach those high-level connections. In the end, he would reach a level of power and wealth he would never have dared to dream of in his old miserable life. But in the middle of all those daydreams, Bando's phone rings again, and on the other end was the group's president. Our guy immediately snaps to attention over the phone, responding with enthusiasm and respect to the call from his great leader. But the man gets straight to the point, explaining the real and important reason behind his sudden call. He reveals that, to celebrate the country's historic qualification for the round of 16, a major gala event with business executives would be held. The gathering, named A Night of Koreans, would bring together all the major World Cup sponsors for an evening of pure opulence. It would be a golden opportunity, bringing together a new generation of promising young business talents to forge valuable partnerships for the future. And since he's the youth representative of the fan group, the president assures our hero that he's the perfect man to represent them at this dinner. Upon arriving at the luxurious ballroom, Bando tries to keep his nerves in check, knowing full well that this is the perfect chance to start building his valuable network. That's when, as he turns around, he comes face to face with an outstretched hand from a refined man who introduces himself as a director at a major corporation. Bando's heart nearly stops when he realizes the man standing before him belongs to none other than Taeseong Electronics. That was the largest and most powerful tech corporation in the entire country at the time. Trying to hide his shock, he extends his hand and returns the greeting, proudly introducing himself as Han Bando of the Red Warriors. And standing before him was Yong Jae-ho, the young and brilliant head of planning at the company.